The broadcast of the regular meeting of the Policy and Government Oversight Committee will now begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Bender. I'm the chair of the Policy and Government Oversight Committee. I'm going to call to order a regular committee meeting for May 13th. I will note for the record that this meeting has remote participation by council members and city staff as authorized under the Minnesota Open Meeting Law, Section 13D.021, due to the declared state of local public health emergency. At this time, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll to verify the presence of a quorum.
Councilmember Reich.
Present.
Gordon.
Here.
Fletcher.
Here.
Cunningham. Councilmember Cunningham. Ellison.
Present.
Goodman.
Present.
Cano.
Here.
Schrader.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Palmisano. Councilmember Palmisano. Jenkins.
Here.
President Bender.
Here.
There are 10 members present.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. There are 3 public hearings on our agenda today. The first hearing is on the proposed project approval and associated assessments and the amount totaling $358,013 for the 3rd Avenue South and Clinton Residential Street resurfacing project. We'll begin with a presentation from Public Works staff, and here to present is Mr. Kennedy, who's the Director of Transportation Maintenance and Repair. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I'm Mike Kennedy. I'm the Director of our Transportation Maintenance Repair Division that performs these resurfacing projects. Today, we're here. The first public hearing is on the 3rd Avenue South and Clinton Residential Paving Project. On December 13th, 2019, the City Council designated the location, streets, and improvements for the 2020 street resurfacing program. This project is part of that annual program. The project consists of the streets as shown on the map on your screen. It's basically 3rd Avenue South and 17th Street East down to 27th Street West and 25th Street and Clinton Avenue in the old previous Clinton residential project. The proposed street resurfacing special assessments were determined by applying the 2020 uniform assessment rates to the land area of benefited parcels located within the street influence area along the the proposed streets. These assessments are not calculated based on project cost alone. The city uses a formula that combines influence area with an annually established UAR, or uniform assessment rate. This formula is carefully considered and applied by city staff and is intended to account for and reflect each project's value to the benefited properties. The 2020 resurfacing rates that are applied are 66 cents per square foot for non-residential properties and 22 cents per square foot for residential properties. The proposed total assessment amount for the 3rd Avenue Clinton Residential Street project is $358,013.20. Individual assessments over $150 will begin collection on the 2021 real estate tax statements, with interests charged at 3.7%, and assessments of $150 or less would be collected in their entirety on the 2021 real estate assessment rates at 3.6%. Information has been provided in the notices as to how persons may prepay the special assessments in full without interest if they so choose. City Council has also passed resolutions whereby a deferment of special assessments may be obtained by showing hardship for any homestead property owned by a person of 65 years of age or older, or retired, or by virtue of a permanent and total disability. We offered and held a community meeting on Wednesday, May 6th, but we didn't have anybody attend that meeting. So today, our goal is to passage of a resolution ordering the work to proceed and adopting special assessments in the amount of $358,013.20 for the 3rd Avenue project, and passage of a resolution requesting the Board of Estimate and Taxation authorize the city's issuance and sale of assessment bonds in that same amount. I am here for any questions if needed, as well as someone from our right-of-way and assessments group.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Are there any questions from council members? I don't see any. We don't have any members of the public signed up to speak on this item, but I'll just pause and make sure Again, that there's no one on the phone that would like to speak. I don't hear any. I will officially open the public hearing and just check one last time if there's anyone who wants to speak. And hearing none, I will close the public hearing. So there were no questions or comments and no one signed in to speak. May I have a motion on this item?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion from council members on item 1? Seeing none, clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Reich,
Aye.
Gordon,
Aye.
Fletcher,
Aye.
Cunningham,
Aye.
Ellison,
Aye.
Goodman,
Aye.
Kano,
Ayuda. Here? Yes. Aye.
Schrader,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Palmisano,
Aye.
Jenkins,
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes.
That carries, and that item will be referred to the City Council meeting on Friday. The second hearing is on a proposed project approval and associated assessments in the amount totaling $453,571 for the North Loop resurfacing project. And I'll invite Mr. Kennedy again to give that staff report.
Thank you again, Madam President. Again, on December 13th, 2019, the City Council designated the location streets improvements for this year's the 2020 street resurfacing projects, of which the North Loop project is part of. The streets affected by this project are shown on the map that you can see on your screen. Essentially, several of the streets down in the new North Loop area of downtown. The city is also coordinating pedestrian bicycle improvements in the North Loop project area with the resurfacing work. The planning, design, and outreach for these improvements are being completed in a separate but coordinated effort with this project. There are no assessments associated with those improvements. There are also several other public and private overlapping projects in the project area that will be impacting the public right-of-way in 2020. It's a very busy place this year. Again, the temporary relocation of the commutator building on North 2nd Avenue and North 1st will occur in 20 and 21. Centerpoint Energy also has 2,800 feet of new gas main and 28 gas service installations. The North Loop pedestrian improvement project work has yet to complete in this area. It's mostly done, but still there's a little bit of work left. And there's a First Street Bridge over Bassett Creek reconstruction project, where it's basically a relining of the Bassett Creek's tunnel there. That will have very little impact here, but there will be work going on there. As such, portions of the North Loop resurfacing project will be postponed until 2021 when all other conflicting work in the area is completed. So we're going to be able to do some of the work this year, but postpone some of it till next year. Public Works plans on starting with some of this work in 2020 where there aren't any conflicts. Project scope and schedules are being developed. So it is too early to be able to accurately predict what areas will be postponed at this time. All project assessments will be delayed until tax year 2022 using the 2020 assessment rates. Therefore, the property owners will not be burdened with any additional assessment costs due to any potential growth in the uniform assessment rate due to the staging of the work over 2 years. Again, the proposed street resurfacing special assessments were determined by applying the 2020 uniform assessment rate at the same amounts that I had enumerated before. All of the total assessment amount for this project is $453,571.90, and the interest rates and payments and potentials for deferments and other options are all the same as I had talked about at the last project. So today we propose passage of resolution ordering the work to proceed and adopting special assessments in the enumerated amount for this project, and passage of resolution requesting the Board of Estimate and Taxation authorize the city's issuance and sale of assessment bonds in the amount of $453,571.90 for this project. Again, I'm here to answer any questions if needed.
Thank you. I will go ahead and open the public hearing. It doesn't look like there's anyone signed in to speak. Is there anyone on the call who would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Are there any questions from council members or a motion on this item? I don't see any questions. Or Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Council President Bender. I just want to thank staff for all their work on this. There are some significant improvements that the North Loop has waited a long time to see happen, and some safety items that are being addressed as a part of this project that people are very excited about. So I'm happy to move approval of this item and just share the gratitude I've heard from many North Loop residents about the good planning that's gone into this project.
Thank you. Councilmember Fletcher has moved the item. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Reich,
Aye.
Gordon,
Aye.
Fletcher,
Aye.
Cunningham,
Aye.
Ellison,
Aye.
Goodman,
Aye.
Kano,
Aye.
Schrader,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Palmisano,
Aye.
Jenkins,
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes.
That carries and that will be referred to the council meeting on Friday. This brings us to our third and final hearing today, which is the proposed project approval and associated assessments in the amount totaling $191,980 for the Rollins and Elm Street Southeast resurfacing project. And we'll have Mr. Kennedy give this report as well.
Again, thank you again, Madam Chair and members of the committee. One more, again, this is part of the same project designation for resurfacing for 2020. This particular one is for Rollins and Elm Street Southeast. These are a group of streets. Oh, can we get their map number 3 up, please? Oh, this is it. Oh, something's wrong here. It's labeled Rollins and Elm, but it's showing North Loop. Oh, perhaps. It's basically, it's Rollins Avenue Southeast from 15th Avenue Southeast to 17th Avenue Southeast that was reconstructed in 1962. 17th Avenue Southeast from Rollins to Elm Street, and then in Elm Street Southeast from 17th Avenue to 24th Avenue Southeast, constructed in 1962. The city is also coordinating bicycle improvements along Rollins Avenue and all the streets there. With the resurfacing work, it's essentially an upgrade of the existing facilities there. There are no assessments associated with that work. Again, the proposed resurfacing rates were special assessments were, there's the right project there. Thank you very much. Benefited parcels located within the street influenced along these improved streets using the 2020 uniform assessment rates. Again, of 66 square feet for non-residential and 22 cents per square foot for residential. The same payment options and deferment potentials are available for this, as I had discussed in the other public hearings. So our recommendation then is for passage of resolution ordering the work to proceed and adopting special assessments in the amount of $191,980.16 for this project, and passage of a resolution requesting the Board of Estimate and Taxation to authorize the city's issuance and sale of assessment bonds in the enumerated amount. Again, that's my presentation, and we're here for questions if needed.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. I will go ahead and open the public hearing. We did not have anyone signed in, but I'll just pause and see if there's anyone who'd like to speak on this item. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Councilmember Gordon.
Yeah, I'm happy to move approval of this item, and also I'm grateful for all the community engagement that Public Works did. This is a project that's right near university access points over in Ward 2, and the bicycle improvements are going to make a big difference, as well as the street improvements. So I move this forward for approval.
Councilmember Gordon has moved approval. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Reich,
Aye.
Gordon,
Aye.
Fletcher,
Aye.
Cunningham,
Aye.
Ellison,
Aye.
Goodman,
Aye.
Kano,
Aye.
Schrader,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Palmisano,
Aye.
Jenkins,
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes.
That carries, and that will be forwarded to the council meeting on Friday. That concludes the public hearings on today's agenda. Thank you again, Mr. Kennedy, for those presentations. We'll now move on to our consent agenda. And this includes those items that have been determined to be matters that do not require separate discussion, but please let me know if you'd like to pull any items from the consent agenda, which I will read for the record. So there are 14 items, beginning with item 4 on the printed agenda. Item 4 is the regular liquor license approval dated for May 13th, 2020. Item 5 is the gambling license renewals dated May 13th, 2020. Items 6 and 7 authorize legal settlements in the claim of Arias Spearman and in the matter of the city and David Gillen and the Public Employees Retirement Association, along with authorization for the city attorney's office to execute documents to effectuate both of these settlements as reflected in the agenda. Items 8 and 9 are contract amendments, first with the Lindquist Law Office for Legal Services in the amount of $600,000, and second with Safe Tool for proactive labor standards outreach and vulnerable worker liaison services in an amount not to exceed $738,000, both of which are fully detailed in the agenda. Item 10 authorizes a contract in an amount not to exceed $2,622 with the state of Minnesota for subleased office space in the North Minneapolis Career Force Center for Employment and Training Services. Item 11 authorizes a contract amendment with Pump and Motor Service Incorporated for the Eastside Maintenance Facility Fuel Depot project in a revised total amount not to exceed $343,475. Item 12 authorizes a grant application for the U.S. Department of Justice totaling $2.5 million for DNA testing of backlogged untested sexual assault evidence kits, as well as the investigation and prosecution of cases from those DNA evidence results. Item 13 authorizes a grant application to the United States Department of Justice for coronavirus emergency supplemental funding in the amount of $1,665,476. Item 14 authorizes an amendment to a temporary construction easement agreement with the University of Minnesota for a new water main near the 10th Avenue Bridge. Item 15 is a contract amendment in a revised amount not to exceed $1.5 million with Safety Signs LLC for the rental of traffic control devices. Item 16 is acceptance of a low bid from Meyer Contracting Incorporated, totaling $1.6 million to provide all materials, labor, equipment, and incidentals for the Bridge 9, Pier 6, and 7 repair project, in accordance with city specifications. And item 17 is acceptance of a gift from Thrivent Financial for Lutherans Foundation and the Minneapolis Foundation's GAP funding program for loans under the city's forgivable no-interest loan program for small businesses, and authorization of an agreement for the conditional gift with the Minneapolis Foundation. Is there any discussion or wish to pull any of the items from today's consent agenda? Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Council President. I don't want to pull the item, but I did want to comment briefly on item 15 because I did get some constituent questions about this. Obviously, there's been some discussion about, in general, the costs of renting signs and markers and doing a lot of the work that is happening in street modifications, both for our day-to-day construction projects and also for adaptations that we've made to create pedestrian space during the pandemic. And it is a lot of money. And I think people are raising some good questions about whether this kind of equipment rental arrangement is the best way to do this and whether there might be better options. And so as we move forward, I don't want to hold it up now because we're making this contract amendment in response to an emergency and the need is timely, and I don't want to slow things down, but I think there's some value in looking for the long run when we get to the stage of renewing this contract or putting this out for RFP again, to think about if there might be more cost-effective ways for the city in the long run to manage our sort of traffic management. And I think the points from constituents are well taken, and I just wanted to make sure they're part of this conversation even as we move forward today.
Thank you, Councilmember Fletcher. I had a similar conversation with Public Works about this and learned a lot about the costs related to sign rental and why we typically use that approach. Is there anyone for Public Works who would like to chime in now on this call? Otherwise, we can follow up with council members as well who may have similar questions.
Council President, this is Robin Hutchison. I can provide a brief commentary on the item before you. This uses our existing contract to cover costs associated with traffic control that was provided on East River Parkway related to a soil displacement event that happened, and also for the growing need for additional traffic control devices related to our COVID response. There are a number of reasons why we contract this out, and it is largely because our needs expand and contract, certainly seasonally, and the cost to the city of having a staff and equipment and storage for an activity that expands and contracts so significantly over different seasons has proven to be the most cost-effective, has proven in the past to be contracting. We are under current contract, and if there is a desire to revisit our approach, we can discuss it then.
Thank you, Director. Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam President. My comments, I wanted to comment on this item as well. My comments are less about the cost, though there is certainly concern around that. But more so, I've heard from constituents that they feel like the signage or the way the signage has been sort of placed and distributed in communities is inequitable, that it seems as if in poor communities that the signs are sort of haphazard or blocking people's abilities to walk and ambulate around the traffic signage. I've noticed myself, and I think I commented on it last week, that some of the signs that we have been placing up in regards to our response for the COVID crisis has been being damaged by trucks and vehicles. And so I just wanted to bring that item and that issue into awareness. Certainly don't want to pull this off the consent agenda today. I think we need to move forward, but in conjunction with Councilmember Fletcher's comments, I think we need to be looking at this in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Vice President. I'll also see if Public Works wants to chime in. I do know that before the Safe Streets opened, that staff had offered to brief all the council members both about the site selection and the implementation. So, and I really appreciated that extra attention for every single council member, as now we're all on the POGO committee for an item that would have normally gone through TPW, as folks get familiarized with the items that usually come through each other's committees. And I think these are really good questions. Maybe I'll stop there and see if the director wants to chime in and think through, and of course we can all together think through follow-up steps for future meetings as well.
Thank you, Council President Bender, Council Vice President Jenkins. The Stay Healthy Streets initiative was done with a combination of deploying some safety signs, traffic control measures, the larger ones, but a good number of what you see out there is actually city staff deploying our own city devices that we more or less scrounged from the yard that can be used on local streets. We're aware that some of them have been moved or hit, and that has happened to a small degree on each one of the routes, and we are able to go and pick those up and fix them. And we're noticing that neighbors are also playing a part in picking them up and fixing them. Council Vice President, you noted some communication you received. I have also received that communication from an individual who had concerns, who suggested that Public Works play more of an oversight role. It is something that I have passed on to our traffic control team, and we will be discussing the concerns with the contractor.
Thank you, Director Hutchison. Really appreciate that.
Great, thank you both for those questions and comments. Is there anything further on any of the consent agenda items? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Reich,
Aye.
Gordon,
Aye.
Fletcher,
Aye.
Cunningham,
Aye.
Ellison,
Aye.
Goodman,
Aye.
Kano,
Aye.
Schrader,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Palmisano,
Aye.
Jenkins,
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes.
That carries, and those items will be forwarded to Friday's council meeting. That concludes the consent items, which brings us to the discussion item. We have one item today, which is a presentation from our public health department about its process for the COVID-19 community response request applications. And so we have our Commissioner of Health, Gretchen Musicant, here to make that presentation.
Thank you, Madam President. Just a little bit of background for this. The Minneapolis Health Department received a little over $400,000 from the State Health Department for COVID-19 response work. And based on consultation we had with a number of policymakers, we set aside $100,000 of that grant to be designated for direct community support through an RFA process. And so the design was that applicants could apply for up to $15,000 each to work with cultural, underserved, and vulnerable communities. We released the RFA in April 15th, and applications were due by April 27th. We had imagined that perhaps we would get as many as 40 applicants. We got over 150 applicants, and the total request was over $2 million for $100,000 that we had to disperse. Really demonstrating great community need and creating some frustration on our part as we saw that great need and we had very little to disperse. So I'm going to share with you the organizations we have funded, and also want to remind you that this is in a context of doing using other strategies to meet community need as well. So the applicants were notified of their status on May 8th, and the selected applicants were Boys and Girls Club for a family meal kit program for $15,000, Centro for a community support program for $15,000, Minneapolis American Indian Center for meal delivery to elders and unsheltered homeless for $15,000, Salvation Army food and hygiene kits to low-income families for $15,000, Seward Neighborhood Group gift card distribution to East African families for $5,000, Southeast Seniors essential supplies, safe transportation, and social services for seniors for $10,000. Volunteers of America for senior nutrition services in Minneapolis Public Housing Authority high-rises for $10,000, and Wayside Recovery Center to provide essential services for parenting women in recovery and their children for $15,000. So as we considered this tremendous outpouring of the description of need and the limited amount of funds we had, we also considered other support that had been coming from the department and that is available, including some recent Violence Prevention Fund dollars, which were originally geared exclusively for violence prevention, but with COVID-19 have been made a little bit more flexible so that some of those funds can also be used in the context of COVID-19. We are continuing to review the unfunded proposals to determine if there are other sources of funding where we can match with those needs that were identified in the programs proposed to us. including there are some community organizations through NRP that are making some of their funds available for service such as this. And so we're seeing if we're working with NCR to see if there's any match between that kind of funding and any of the applicants that were not funded. Our community engagement team is also reviewing unfunded proposals to determine what supports other than direct funding we are able to supply to those community organizations, and coordinating resource allocations between external providers and community groups with identified needs. There's a couple system issues that came to light as part of this process. One is that a great majority of the proposals had to do with food security, and most of the organizations were not in the business per se of providing food normally, or it was an adjunct to what they were doing. And so we are tasking a team of folks to look at the overall system of food access in the city to see if there are other ways that we can support or coordinate the work of that group. And then the other system issue that came to light is something we have seen in our work with community organizations around violence prevention, where a number of organizations that are really in touch with and connected to communities that we want to serve are not always equipped to compete at the same level for funding. And a response we have made within violence prevention work is to create something called the Blueprint Institute, where we invited organizations to come and receive additional capacity building training so that they are better able to not only compete for city dollars, but for other dollars that might be available to help them do their work. And we certainly saw a need much broader than the violence prevention community as a result of this RFA. And we're wondering if the Neighborhood 2020 plan and some of the investment in community organizations could use a model like the Blueprint Institute as they try and build greater community capacity within community-based organizations. So I'll stop there for questions or comments.
Great, thank you, Commissioner. Council Vice President Jenkins.
Yes, thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Commissioner Musicant. I really empathize with your team's challenge of trying to meet $2 million worth of need with $100,000. That's got to be, it's a very difficult position to be in. I mean, I was really struck by the fact that most of the support is supporting food insecurity, and I absolutely know that our seniors are vulnerable populations, and this whole system issue that you identified around food is a little concerning and confusing to me. I'm hearing from the Minneapolis public schools that are distributing food that their food is going unused, like people aren't picking it up. And so, you know, and it's in all of these communities that that we funded for to help support food, but it seems like to me that we should be really trying to make broader connections to those resources that are available for people already. And I know we have food shelves, and I know that there's money coming from the state to help support those food shelves. So I'm just really confused why these organizations are not taking advantage of these. Also, I mean, we know that African American and Latino families are being disproportionately impacted by this virus. and it would seem like some of the support would go to those communities to help address this. So I'd be interested to find out what is some of the next steps in terms of what other resources. I know we don't have a ton of resources at the city to try to address this, so it'll be interesting to see how we come forward. I mean, I appreciate the flexibility in some of the violence prevention funds, but we really need to be targeting our resources towards these really vulnerable communities. And as I stated in my initial comments, these are certainly vulnerable communities that the resources have been distributed to. However, for food insecurity, it seems like that is not the biggest challenge in Minneapolis. I mean, I could be very wrong, but I'm just going by what the MPS has been telling me, that they have food that's going unused, lots of it. So that's it.
Thank you, Councilmember Jenkins, Madam Chair, if I might. I think your comments about the school food program really illustrate some system issues we need to work on. So is that a lack of awareness on the part of families? I know that food is to be made available, or is being offered to families who are not necessarily, do not have children that are enrolled in public schools, but other families as well. Yeah, all the supports that are going to food shelves and so on, we need to make sure that good work that is out there and those resources that are out there are widely understood and tapped into if there is this preponderance of food insecurity, which seems to be illustrated by not only the applications we funded, but all the applications, many of the applications we received. Secondly, yes, looking for other resources. We have some leads on some corporate funding that might be available to generally support COVID response that perhaps we could apply to this if it comes to fruition. And like I mentioned, the incredible generosity and flexibility of some of the neighborhood organizations to make unspent funds available for this response citywide is also what was a wonderful surprise to me. And we are trying to make sure that we can apply it where the needs exist. So those are some tangible leads, but we are hustlers, as you might know, as a department. And so we will continue to look in many different corners and with an eye towards supporting the work in the community.
Madam President, if I may follow up a little bit.
Sure. Yep, go ahead.
Thank you, Director Musicat, for that. I do appreciate the challenge in this situation. Can you explain a little bit more about the Boys and Girls Club? I really thought that they were recipients of the Minneapolis Public Schools food resources, and I live right across the street from the Boys and Girls Club, and they're closed. They are not open.
Madam Chair, Council Member, Council Vice President Jenkins, I will have to get back to you a little bit more on the specific details. I know that when I talked to the teams that had reviewed the RFAs, in a number of cases, there were good programs in place that these dollars would really expand the availability of those programs, and so they were building on other programs. But I will have folks describe a little bit more about that program and get that to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Commissioner. Council Vice President Jenkins brought up a component of what I was going to speak to. It does seem to me like the Boys and Girls Club is duplicating what MPS is doing. There are MPS is donating their food kits to other food shelves in my ward that are so I know that there's food available, and so so I just kind of wonder, like, are we duplicating something that doesn't need to be duplicated? Instead, as you mentioned, we need to build up that system of awareness. We've been putting it out, that information out. We've been trying to advertise it within our network as a ward office, and so that's a little bit of a concern around that duplication. So I know that we want to get the dollars out of the door quick because it's a crisis, so we need a rapid response. I would just say that, like, I have a very serious concern about the fact that we don't have resources going to any Northside-based organizations, nor groups that are specifically serving Black communities, given that we being the Black community are so disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. We see those numbers tick up more and more every day, and the disproportionality. And so I know that you had mentioned that the Violence Prevention Fund is more flexible, but like this, I would say that, like, this doesn't look great for us because it's going towards large organizations that have the ability, who have the grant writing ability to be able to access dollars more quickly. And I know that neighborhood organizations in, like, North Minneapolis, and my ward I could speak to, are, like, really struggling to meet the needs of folks. Like, they are doing meal delivery, they are doing senior nutrition, like, they're trying to do all of those things, and they don't have all of the funding necessary to meet those needs. And so, in fact, they're being asked by other city departments to donate money towards other organizations, and they don't, like, they need that help because they're already doing that work, and they know the neighbors, they're deeply connected to the community. And so, I just, I guess the question is, because, I looked through the racial equity impact analysis, and it still wasn't quite clear to me, like, what was the racial equity analysis in this? Because, when we're in crisis and we need to do things fast, sometimes race equity is the first thing that goes out the window because it slows things down, it requires more intentionality. And so I would say, like, what was the racial equity analysis? And, what is the timeline for the violence prevention dollars? And I guess I just, like, have a little bit of a concern with leaning into violence prevention to be the fund of money that goes towards Northside and Black-led, Black-serving organizations, because, like, yeah, I guess I just have a concern around, like, those two things being blended. So what was the racial equity analysis, and what is the timeline for the violence prevention dollars?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Cunningham. These are good and important questions that occur to me as well. Thank you for raising them. The timeline for the youth violence grants, like, for how they're out already, and so I imagine you're asking through what period of time do they end? Is that correct? A nod will do.
Well, I'll just say that, like, we're here right now talking about one fund of money that is going towards COVID-19 response. And if the violence prevention dollars are also, the Office of Violence Prevention Fund dollars are also going towards COVID responses, we're not having that same conversation right now. And so I like separating those two and kind of saying that the violence prevention dollars are going to address the COVID-19 response. I guess I feel like we're not able to have a full, robust conversation about what the city is funding because we're here and talking about this, and it's mostly large organizations. There's no north side based, there's no black led, black serving specifically, despite the disproportionality and kind of the logic that I'm hearing is like, well, we're going to also turn to the Violence Prevention Fund to be able to do that, to be able to address those gaps. And so, you know, where is that information available? So that we can have those conversations at the same time, because this list is just very concerning for me as a standalone document. Seeing this, to me, it looks like there was no racial equity analysis, and that the city is not investing in North Side Black, and as well as Black-led, Black-serving organizations that are doing this work in a very nuanced, community-led way.
So, Director, if I can just sort of jump in, I'm hearing a lot of concern from council members, which is just fine. I think we should give the director a chance to answer further. She may, it sounds like, need to check in with the staff that made these recommendations to get more of those details. I would suggest if council members want to propose a delay or other actions that you go ahead and do so. So I'll turn it over to Director Musicant to answer some of those questions or to let us know if more time is needed. And then again, just invite any council member who would like to make a motion or make a suggestion to do that as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know that I have a clear, helpful response to the questions. I certainly absolutely understand the concerns that are being raised and feel them in my gut as well. So yes, if there are things you'd like me to follow up on, I will gladly do that.
Madam President, I would not suggest that we have a delay. I mean, I really do believe that the organizations that have been selected are needing these resources and likely needing them as soon as they can get them. So that would not be my choice.
Thank you. Councilmember Cunningham, looks like you have a question about process.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to ask for clarification. So this today is, the presentation is a receive and file. Do we as a council have the authority to approve the money being allocated, or is that currently outside of the purview of our legislative powers under the emergency declaration?
Thank you, Councilmember, for the question. This has been the subject of many discussions between, I think, the City Attorney's Office, Mayor's Office, Clerk. I don't know if the City Attorney's Office wants to take the first stab, or the Clerk, on that answer.
Hi, Council President Bender. This is Eric Nilsson from the City Attorney's Office. The mayor has issued emergency regulations pursuant to his emergency declaration that apply broadly in the context of expediting the provision of emergency assistance. It also is broadly worded to allow for the expedited, when necessary, incurrence of obligations and the entering of contracts. And so to the extent that there is an imminent need and a necessary need, there is the ability to streamline this process through the emergency regulation. With that said, I'm always of the voice that where there can be some degree of consultation, even on these matters with the council, that is warranted. But I believe the emergency regulation would apply here.
Madam President, if I may follow up.
Sure, Councilmember Cunningham.
Cool. So yeah, I mean, you know, the money is being allocated. I don't know if there's really an action that we can take today as a council. You know, I think I've expressed the concerns, and for us to be, taking into consideration as we're moving forward. I don't really think at this point there's much that we can do as a council, but on the record, for consideration, the concerns that have been addressed or that have been expressed, hopefully will be addressed in the future. And I am available to be able to help provide that sort of analysis and recommendations around which organizations are doing what kind of work in our communities for more specific outreach in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually thought that Council Vice President Jenkins and Councilmember Cunningham made some very good points. And I don't think it should matter whether or not the emergency declaration is in place and whether we have the power to make a change. Staff are hearing a number of concerns, and probably the mayor's office is hearing this too, and perhaps could consider figuring out where the need is greatest. I can tell you it's greatest in rental assistance. I'm sure the council president can tell you that too. So I don't think it's a good idea just to throw the money out there because the staff had some sort of process. And I'm not sure I support the idea of just shut up, we don't have any power either. This is about the allocation of resources where the need is the greatest. And so we have as a group come together to determine what our priorities are, and I think that that should be part of the process as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Yeah, so I mean, I think we have a number of options of how to proceed. I had a conflict for agenda setting this week at POGO, but I know Council Vice President and Councilmember Fletcher were there and able to talk about this ahead of time with staff. I was on a call with our legislative delegation about this week's urgent decisions around funding for the CARES Act, an appropriate, topic related to this one. I think our options here would be to, to make a direction to staff, and certainly we can have follow up with staff and the mayor's office. I'm a little concerned. I'll just state two concerns. First, I think we go down a little bit of a difficult road anytime policymakers start getting too involved in decisions about which organizations receive funding and which don't. Obviously, we do that sometimes, but I think it's usually better when staff creates a process and that policymakers are comfortable with and are able to make those decisions more at the staff level. I think it removes some of the potential conflicts that come when policymakers and electeds get involved directly. So that's just my perspective on that question always. But I hear that there's concern about the criteria that were used or the process. I'm a little concerned about the organizations that have been identified for funding. I know that many of our nonprofits in all of our communities are struggling as well, along with everyone else. So I'll just also voice that, if we do have a delay, I think we need to be pretty clear about what the ask is of staff, whether it's to restart this entire process or, because again, it's only for $100,000, or if it's to delay it, as Councilmember Cunningham, I think, suggested, to coordinate with other funding sources that staff are currently investigating, or sort of what the proposal is. And I also fully understand the concerns. I just I'll look to others who are raising them to suggest the next steps here on this. Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you, and I certainly appreciate this discussion. I just thought I could weigh in to help people maybe understand where another council member's at. I am most comfortable proceeding with these fundings and trying to figure out how can we make sure that this process is more inclusive, done more thoughtfully, and a little more carefully moving forward. I think I agree with Council Vice President when she said she did not want to necessarily hold up these funds at this time, but she sure wanted us to drill down and start figuring out how we could make sure to target them better in the future and be more inclusive. I can't remember all the terminology, but get to the most vulnerable. And so I think we do have an opportunity with this discussion to improve steps as we move forward. And by letting this happen, we're still responding quickly to address critical needs in our community.
Thank you, Councilmember. I also heard.
Also, just want to point out that if we have some kind of change of thought and opportunity, this is a committee. This isn't the final meeting, so we could actually try to claw back a little bit on Friday if we were really desperate to do so. But I'm not advocating that necessarily. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember. I don't see anyone else in queue to make a comment or motion. You know, for discussion purposes, I'll go ahead and move to receive and file the item, and I'll see if there's any discussion from council members. Again, I would welcome anything that a council member would want to suggest on this item. I don't see any further discussion, so I'll take that to mean that you know, the concerns have been noted. As Council Vice President suggested, looks like, and I think the director sounded very open to further discussions with the council members who've raised issues, especially around any additional future funds that might be coming forward. I appreciate very much all of you for raising them and for being willing to work on future phases of funding. So with that, I will pause one last time to make sure no one else wants to say anything. Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Reich,
Aye.
Gordon,
Aye.
Fletcher,
Aye.
Cunningham,
Aye.
Ellison,
Aye.
Goodman,
Aye.
Kano,
Aye.
Schrader,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Palmisano,
Aye.
Jenkins,
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes.
That carries, and that report is received and filed. And again, with potential follow-up between now and Friday, as well as in the future. Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam President. Excuse me. I would like, you know, I do think that there needs to be a concrete action from today, you know, with us moving forward. And so I would say that I would like to bring forward a staff direction, and I can type this out and send it out to folks for there to be a report back around how a racial equity analysis is applied for with the from the health department about how a racial equity analysis is applied for allocating dollars to community organizations. So I bring that forward as a motion for approval.
Thank you. Councilor Cunningham has moved a staff direction that would direct the health department to bring forward a racial equity analysis as he just described, and I believe Councilor Cunningham is emailing that now. Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you, Madam President. I actually have an announcement for when we have concluded our business, so I will wait until after we've taken up Councilmember Cunningham's motion. So.
Thank you, Councilmember Ellison.
Madam President, if I may, I would also add to include for the date to be to POGO, not next week, but the following week after that. So that would be May 27th. And I welcome feedback from the commissioner if that feels like a realistic timeline.
It's May 27th, isn't that awfully?
Yes, so let's just take these things one at a time. So Councilmember Cunningham is suggesting that there'll be a report back in 2 cycles. As Council Vice President pointed out, in our typical calendar, we have that week marked as a ward work week, There are a number of discussions happening, including one at 3 p.m. during our policy group about adjusting our calendar coming up related to the amended budget that the mayor will be proposing soon. So I think some of those final calendar decisions are coming yet in the next couple of days. I know the clerk also chimed in to ask specifically about a due date. I just want to make sure that the things that are happening in chat are voiced for the public record. As we kind of work out the report back date, I do see Councilmember Fletcher in queue, and I also want to pause at some point, maybe after that, to check back in with Commissioner Musicant. I will also just note, for my own kind of understanding and also for my colleagues, the RCA for this item did not include a list of identified organizations. What it did was outline the process and state that reviewers would be making recommendations to the Commissioner of Health for a decision on the funding. So my understanding of reading the RCA prior to this meeting was that the council action was a receive and file of that process description. Not, for example, the council approving these specific organizations for funding. So I think that's the origin of some of the questions that my colleagues are asking and the intention behind this staff direction as well. So Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, President Bender. I guess I just wanted to ask, because in the RCA also there was a race equity analysis, which is something that we ask for items that are coming before the council, and that was included in the RCA. And so I just wanted to, I guess, make sure that we had looked at that and see how what we're asking for in the staff direction would be different from what's already been provided as part of the RCA.
Thank you. So at this point, Commissioner, I know there's a lot of things being asked and stated. I think maybe we need to turn it over to you to clarify where the process is in its timeline, and so what communications have happened with the organizations that were identified, and then any thoughts you have about the race equity analysis piece.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, the process is already, the wheels are turning. People have been notified of their status, and we are working on the contracts with folks. So that's where we are in the process in terms of these particular grants. I welcome the staff direction. The SPAC, which is the committee that we have created within our incident management team of community voices to bring those into our process. They are also working on an equity analysis, and so I think that will dovetail well with a presentation to you about our staff process. And I think it will be enriched by their work on that, and hope that their work is timed sufficiently. If not, I will let you know if it's just off one cycle, and we can make sure that we dovetail the two together.
Thank you, Commissioner. And do you have a sense of, for example, that 2-week time frame, how that aligns or not with the process that's underway, or the feasibility of having that report at that time?
Madam Chair, the group is meeting tonight. Council Vice President Jenkins also attends, and so I was just briefed on their launching of that work today, a little bit earlier, and so I will certainly get a better handle of their timeline and share with them how it might dovetail with this staff direction, and be able to say better tomorrow morning what the length of their process is. But they are only constituted to last for a finite amount of time, so I think they're working quickly as well.
Thank you. Councilmember Cunningham, I see in queue, and then Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam President. I did mention earlier about the racial equity impact analysis that was included with the legislative file. I would just say that it still did not get down to the level of detail around how racial equity was actually applied because the ultimate product did not demonstrate racial equity. And so I want to make sure that as we are moving forward and looking at funding, that we actually have a concrete connection between race equity and how the dollars are actually being allocated. So it's not duplicating it because the work had already been because the racial equity impact analysis did not have a clear connection and was not actually very specific in how it was applied. And I will, so that we have a better understanding of the timeline for this group, I will go ahead and withdraw my motion, and I will reintroduce it on Friday at the council meeting after speaking further with Commissioner Musicant about a realistic timeline. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Council Member. Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam President. And Ms. Musicant, can you just talk a little bit about the SPAC? I'm not fully sure that everybody is aware of that work and how it's proceeding. And can you confirm that the members of that group are being compensated, and with the hopes that some of those funds are being used in those communities that they are working in?
Madam Chair, Council Member or Council Vice President Jenkins. Yes, the SPAC committee, and now that I've learned their letters, I forget what they stand for. Maybe Council.
It is the Shared Power Advisory Committee.
There, it's a great name. For some reason, I can't hold it in my head. Is composed of community members, and they are representing viewpoints from across the various constituencies. And it is really a new design within our emergency response to carve out a whole branch of our response to be engaging the voice of the community, not only as touch points for us to check with, but also as ways to influence the process. And I believe we've had 3 meetings now, or today is our 3rd meeting. They meet weekly. They are being compensated with dollars from the state health improvement program, which comes through the state of Minnesota, in a model that's similar to other work that's been done there. And their role is to not only identify community need, but to help prioritize that need and to give input to the department in particular, and have invited Council Vice President Jenkins to be there to be a part of the discussions to see if there are additional policy issues beyond the department as well. So it is really an effort to be community engaged at the highest level, and but it is also something we are designing as we go, and we'll be very excited if I'm able to bring forward their recommendation at the same time responding to Councilmember Cunningham's request.
Thank you, Ms. Musicant and Commissioner Musicant. And the only thing I would add to that is that group is absolutely bringing forward many of the issues that are being discussed here today, and several others about how the city can best respond to the COVID crisis in an equitable manner. And so I just want to assure my colleagues that many of these issues are definitely being discussed within community. We're getting really good feedback on how to improve our responses and our services and taking those recommendations into to deep and full consideration. And so I know for a fact that many of those, that it is a broad representation of communities from all across the city, and representing the East African community, the Latinx community, the African American and disabled and seniors, the LGBT community. So there is a lot of voices that are really helping the health department and myself as a policymaker to drill down to issues that we may or may not necessarily identify without that community input. And so, so just wanted to provide a little more insight into that process. So again, thank you, Commissioner Musican.
Okay, thank you all very much for this discussion. And I think, as many have pointed out, you know, even though this particular funding is a small amount on one particular issue, we know that going forward for many months and likely years, we'll be facing these kinds of difficult decisions about how to use limited resources to reach the most benefit. And I think many of you have spoken about how we want to make sure that our values and the policy directions of the council are showing up in each and every one of these decisions. So I really, again, I really appreciate all of the comments that have been made. I do want to just highlight, since we're talking about it at such length, that I think many of these issues are also places where, I mentioned this at the council meeting on Friday, where I think there are some topics where different levels of government are working really seamlessly together to provide a response to community. And I think there are other issues where there is less clarity around which levels of government are the lead or the funding lead on providing services. I think I talked with a colleague in another metro community recently who said food security is a huge issue that they're experiencing and had asked for more resources and support from the state of Minnesota on that issue particularly. I know that a lot of us are working on housing and homelessness issues. Again, a topic that overlaps with the county and the state as well. And so I think as we move forward, again, as things get harder with our budgets and collectively, and as we learn more about how the CARES Act funds will be allocated throughout the state, I think part of the question with each of these items is both how can we best serve our own residents and constituents in Minneapolis with the funds that we do have, but also how are we leveraging those partnerships strategically to make sure that all of the issues are covered, from housing support to food security to health and safety and all of the other issues that are coming up because of COVID and the economic impacts that it's bringing to our communities. So I just wanted to add that context as well, because I think it's important for us to always be working in partnership too. With that, I'll see if there's any other discussion on this item. We've gone ahead and received and filed the report. I don't see any, and I know that we did have one announcement from Councilmember Ellison before we adjourn. Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you, Madam President. I wanted to make an announcement. From my role as election chair, and so the Secretary of State's online voter registration portal opens today. Wanted to note that for the public, and voters can both register online as well as request a vote by mail ballot. That means that starting today, voters can use the portal on the Secretary of State's website to request a vote by mail ballot, both for the August primary as well as the November general election. And it's important to note that in Minnesota, it is your legal right to request an absentee ballot, and you do not have to have an excuse. So just wanted to make sure folks in the public are reminded of that. And given the uncertainty with coronavirus, we're encouraging all voters to consider using vote by mail options, as we don't know what things are going to look like as we proceed into this election year. And it is really important that people vote. So we want to make sure that people have that access. A few other things to note. You can get more information at the Secretary of State's website. I'm going to read that off here. There's a lot of things to it, so hopefully folks have their pen out. But it's www.sos.state.mn.us. That's the Secretary of State's website. And you can also get information about how to register and check your registration status, and find out what's on the ballot and get information about your voting options, and request assistance from the city's elections and voter services team. And we got a great team here at the city. And so you can either go to the city's website to get some assistance, which is vote.minneapolismn.gov, or of course you can call 311. And so I just want to thank the clerks, and I want to thank the elections and voter services team for all their hard work in making sure that that we've got great, equitable elections happening still in Minneapolis despite all the craziness. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Anything further before we adjourn?
Council President?
Yes, Council Vice President.
Oh, thank you. I had myself in queue, but nice haircut, Council Member Ellison. It's my first time seeing you with the new haircut. But Madam President, I was just going to ask, is there a way or an opportunity that we may get an update on some of these other jurisdictional partner action activities that are happening that may correlate to the work that we're doing? It would be really, I think, critical and important for us to be able to share that with our constituents as we hear from people who are concerned that they're being left out of the city's response. If we are able to talk more about what's happening at other levels and other jurisdictions, it may help to ease some of the concerns that people are expressing.
Thank you, Council Vice President. I mean, you're fully updated on all the information that I have, but I think let's follow up at the policy group meeting in a few minutes or in other venues to talk about how to bring that forward in a public space. I think that's a good suggestion. I think in some ways it may be comforting, and in other ways it may not be. But I agree that our constituents certainly deserve the full picture of what's happening and what's not. Any further discussions on anything before we adjourn? Seeing none, I will, without objection, declare our meeting adjourned and wish everyone a great afternoon. Thank you.